Okay, colleagues, I'm going to ask those who are members of the committee to just turn on your cameras so I can see that we have quorum. Okay, I think we have, there we go. And Councillor Turner has sent his regrets, so we have everybody else. So I'm going to call the meeting to order. The City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing and advisory committee meetings and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. I'll deal with any disclosures of pecuniary interest. If any members have any, now's the time. I see none. 1.2, we need to elect a vice chair for the committee for a term ending November 30th, 2021. I would look to any nominations any members would like to make for that. Ms. Higgs.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Helmer because he did such a great job chairing this committee last year.
Is there a seconder for that nomination? Councillor Van Holst. All right. Councillor Helmer, I assume you accept the nomination?
I'm happy to do it, but I'm also quite happy to have somebody else do it if somebody wants to. I will be the vice chair if that's the wish of the committee for sure.
It seems to be trending that way, given there's a mover and a seconder, and I think it's a great idea too. So with that, are there any other nominations? Seeing none, then I will call all those in favor. If you could show your hands. Any opposed? That carries. Okay, congratulations, Councillor Helmer. And we'll move on to consent. There's none. Scheduled items, there's none. Items for direction. I'll just outline for the committee how I'll proceed through the items for direction. The first two are KPMG items. So we'll deal with them separately because one is for approval and one is for receipt. But we'll start off with those. Then we'll move to 4.3 to 4.6, which can be discussed and presented together. 4.7 and 4.8 are both findings, so we'll deal with those separately. And that's how we'll proceed through the meeting. So I'll start with 4.1, which is the audit planning report for the year ending December 31st, 2020. And I believe Ms. Dembach has some comments or a presentation on this report. So I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks for having us here. It's really nice to get a chance to speak with everyone. I'm joined by Deanna Baldwin, who's the Audit Senior Manager for the City of London. And we'd like to take just a few minutes to walk you through the highlights of our audit plan for fiscal 2020. So with respect to our actual report, I'm going to jump right into page 2 of our report, which just talks about the impact of COVID on most of the organizations that we're seeing these days and the different types of considerations that we make as we develop our audit plan that are specific to COVID. So not all of these will be necessarily of huge impact to the city itself, but just to make the committee aware that we are considering these things as we go through our audit plan and determining how to go about completing our testing and whether any additional work needs to be done, given the current environment that we're in. And on page 3, again, is more specific to the city, the types of things that we've considered in planning so far, just understanding the impact that COVID might have had on any of the metrics we use, for example, for calculating our materiality benchmarks, and any potential financial reporting impacts. We do anticipate likely completing the audit remotely again this year, depending obviously on where things are at. And we did do that last year, so we know we're much, as a group, much more well prepared, I think, to complete that this year as well if needed. And so at this point, we don't foresee any issues with that. And the page 4 just kind of goes through to show the committee what the full scope of our audit is. So it is considered a group audit. It consists of 16 in-scope but not financially significant to the city consolidated financial statements, which would be the boards and commissions, which we audit separately. And really all we wanted to make the committee aware of here is that it is the same KPMG audit group that is conducting all of these audits. So we don't need to rely on the work of other auditors. And I'll hand it over to Deanna to talk a little bit more about audit risks and our detailed procedures.
So just on page 5, further to Katie's comments, we are completing the audit of the group outside of the London office. So there's no change there, and we provided our key contacts for your reference. Moving on to page 6 of the report, we'll just jump into some of the audit risks in our planned approach. The first one that you see here is the risk related to revenue recognition. So this is a presumed risk that's present in every single audit that we perform, and we're required to assess the impact on our audit. You'll note below that we have rebutted this risk, as we don't think that there's any specific risk for the city. On page 7, again, another presumed risk, which is the fraud risk related to management override of controls. We're not permitted to rebut this risk, so our audit methodology includes procedures such as testing of journal entries, performing retrospective review of significant estimates, and getting an understanding of any significant unusual transactions that occurred during the year and testing them as appropriate. Moving on to page 8, some other financial statement captions which are significant to our audit. The first one being completeness of accrual, mainly because of the dollar value of the accruals balance, as well as the fact that there is significant judgment and assumptions that are used in order to develop that balance. So we've summarized here our planned approach, which includes items such as sending legal confirmations, review of council minutes, and obtaining support for any subsequent payments that are made where appropriate. Moving on to page 9 of the report, we just mentioned a couple other areas of focus here. The first one being capital projects and acquisition. This item here is significant to the city, namely because of the dollar value of the tangible capital assets balance, as well as the fact that there is some estimation uncertainty when it comes to determining the useful life of various assets. So below, we've summarized our planned audit approach for you, which includes, similar to prior years, the use of data and analytics as part of our audit. So if you've seen one of our presentations before, we do include data and analytics to test WIP balances, as well as to assist with our disposals testing, and as well as we use data and analytics to look at holdbacks. The next item on here is payroll and employee future benefits. So this is a significant dollar value balance to the city as well. The balance at December 31st, 2019 was 162 million. So we've also summarized our procedures below, which include obtaining Mercer's report or reports from whichever actuaries are engaged, and reviewing significant assumptions that are included as part of developing that estimate. On page 10, you'll see that we've listed taxation, user charges, and transfer payments, which is included as a significant item due to the dollar value, which is $1.2 billion at December 31st, 2019. We've included below a summary of the procedures that we plan to execute. We've also included here debt issuances, and it's our understanding that debentures totaling 36 million were issued during the year, and we'll be reviewing the accounting treatment for these to make sure that they're appropriate. So this by no means represents a full summary of all of the procedures that we will be performing as part of our audit, but just a high-level summary of some of our main areas of focus. On page 11, we have presented to you our planned materiality for the audit, which is $17.9 million. So this preliminary materiality balance has been calculated based on the prior year consolidated expenses amount. And as Katie mentioned, we will reassess this materiality number to ensure that it does make sense once we have received the final 2020 numbers. One number on here that I'll draw to your attention is the audit misstatement posting threshold. So given the proposed materiality, any difference above 895,000 that came to our attention as part of our audit, we would be presenting to you. We'll move on just to page 13, which is mostly for your reference. It provides a summary of KPMG's commitment to audit quality and how we achieve audit quality. On page 14, we've provided a little more detail as far as our KPMG audit team and included our contact information here should you need it. On page 15, we've summarized our key deliverables and milestones. You'll note that our year-end fieldwork is planned to start on April 5th through to about mid-June, and we'll plan to report to the committee on June 16th. On page 16, we just wanted to draw to your attention a new auditing standard that has come out and will impact the year ended December 31st, 2020. So this standard really relates to estimates and our documentation surrounding estimates that's included in the file. There shouldn't be any significant changes to the reporting that you see. In fact, likely none at all, but we did want to bring this standard change to your attention because it does impact the scope of our audit work.
Perfect. So I'll continue on slide 18. Our proposed fees are in line with the engagement letter and the fee schedule that was provided at that time. And we have noted there may be some additional fees related to the implementation of this new auditing standard that Deanna just mentioned. And as we go through that, we'll sort of scope out the number of additional hours that it takes and agree with management. But we've provided a preliminary estimate here. And really, it's just going to be dependent on the number of significant estimates in the financial statements and the availability of information and documentation that's required. So in the appendices, there's quite a bit of additional information here for the committee. And I apologize if you can hear squeaking in the background. I have a puppy who has found a chew, like the loudest chew toy in the entire house. So my apologies if you guys can hear that. In Appendix 1, it just details our required communications, which you'll see most of them do occur at the end of the audit as we present our audit findings report. One of the things, though, that we are required to ask of those charged with governance is with respect to fraud and whether anyone on the committee is aware of any alleged or suspected fraud or any fraud risks that are there in the city that we should be considering as part of our audit. So I will put that question out there to the group, whether you want to answer it at this point in time, or you have both mine and Deanna's contact information in this report as well, if you would like to respond after the fact. So hearing no responses, I'll assume that there's nothing to make us aware of at this point in time. In Appendix 2, we've provided some more information for you on that change in auditing standards around auditing estimates. So that's more just for your reading and understanding what the changes are. And then in Appendix 4, we've listed some current developments. So we've reported these to the committee in the past. There's some big public sector accounting standard changes coming down the pipeline. I guess the good news is those, the bigger ones, including asset retirement obligations and financial instruments, have been deferred by a year due to COVID. So previously they were set to come into effect for the fiscal 2022 year end, and now they've been pushed to the fiscal 23 year end. So we will continue to work with management and provide more information as we get closer to those implementation dates. But again, at this point, just wanting to make the committee aware of them. And then the other thing I wanted to point out is Appendix 5, which is the financial indicators. We've been preparing this document for the committee for the last number of years, just to kind of give you a sense of how the city is trending compared to some of its comparator municipalities and also year over year. So we've now got 6 years of data in these charts, which go from 2014 to the latest FIR data that we had available at the time, which was for 2019. And so again, really provided for the information of the committee, but it's kind of a nice way to see in a graphical format, you know, how the city is progressing on some of these key financial indicators over time. So I don't need to go into any more detail on those, but and that really wraps up our audit plan. Happy to take any questions that the committee might have.
Okay, I'll look to the committee for questions. If not, I'll look for a mover and a seconder for the audit planning report. Moved by Councillor Helmer, seconded by Ms. Higgs. Any discussion or further questions now that it's moved and seconded? Okay, seeing none, then all those in favor, you can raise your hand. Any opposed? Then that carries. The next item is 4.2. Also, Ms. Denbach, I believe you're going to present this. This is the Downtown Closed Circuit Television Program Report, Specified Audit Procedures for the year ending December 31st, 2020. Go ahead.
Thank you. So this is provided to the committee for information. The report has been reviewed by management and it has been finalized. Not too much to say here because it is what we call a procedures and findings report. Basically anything that we find as we go through our procedures is listed here right in the report. So if there are questions from the committee, I'm happy to take those at this time, but not much to elaborate on there.
Okay, questions about this particular report? If not, I'll look for a mover of receipt, mover and seconder. Councillor Van Holst, Ms. Higgs, that's moved and seconded. Any further discussion or questions? Okay, all those in favor of receipt? Any opposed? Okay, that carries as well. Thank you, Ms. Denbach. I think those were your two items. We appreciate all the work of you and your team, and of course, the work ahead is still to come. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
For 4.3 through 4.6, actually for the remainder of the items, Mr. Price will be presenting, but I'd like to deal with 4.3 to 4.6. I know Mr. Price can walk us through a number of those items if the committee would like us to. Particularly, there are some revisions to the audit plan that might be relevant to walk through. I'd like Mr. Price to just touch on those items, and we'll deal with 4.7 and 4.8 separately. So, Mr. Price, do you want to give us a brief review of these one at a time? And then, you know, if there's not a lot to say, you don't have to, but we can take questions on each one individually as you walk through them, and then we can move them as a group, unless colleagues would like to deal with any of them separately, which I'll ask for now. We're talking 4.3 to 4.6. No? Okay. Mr. Price.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I apologize. My internet went out, so I'm on my cell phone. Is the sound quality okay?
Yes, it is. We can hear you fine.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you. Let me know if it does change. What I'll do is stop at the end of each section and just ask if there's any questions. Is that what you wanted? And they'll just go at a high level?
That was exactly the way I wanted to do it. High level, and
okay.
If there's need for more information as you stop in each section, I'll look to colleagues to see if they have any questions.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll start with the internal summary update memo, which is page 71 of your package. What you'll note is we're referring to the internal audit plan for the past year as well as the coming year. For the most part, we're complete the work for 2020. And except for one report for police services, and it is complete, but the process for that is that it goes through the police services board first, and then we'll come back to this committee. So we're just waiting for that process to complete in February. The other item is the plan for the upcoming 2021 year, and consistent with the past few meetings, what we've done is a more agile approach where we reconfirm the plan each period and plan out the audits for the next, between now and the next meeting, which I understand will take place in June. So that revised plan is a document in your package, again, starting on page 72 of your package. And the document itself should not really have any significant changes from the one that we presented actually in September of last year. And I did leave the 2020 column in there just for reference. What it does is the added information is really to give some indication of where we plan to do the work within the calendar year. We've indicated quarters. You'll notice the first one is Q3 2021, and that's a preliminary plan at this point. What the senior leadership team met, in the two projects that are confirmed between now and the next audit committee meeting would be the review of the traffic management project review, which would be the first one that we'd undertake after this meeting, assuming this plan is approved. And then the review of the SaaS applications, which would be hosted applications that we would review. So with that, I'm going to consider that read, just given it's not really a new document, and then ask if there's any questions.
Are there any questions up to this point? Okay. Seeing none, please continue along.
Okay. So the next one would be the internal audit dashboard report on page 79 of your package. And that should be similar to other reports that you've seen. This relates mainly to the 2020 audit, because you'll notice in the left column the progress that we've completed all the projects within the year. And again, just highlighting the fact that the police services report will be completed in the next month and brought through this committee. It does indicate as well the two projects that we're planning to complete between now and the next audit committee meeting, and some of the activities that we plan to do before that next meeting around preparing for the audit committee meeting and follow-ups of findings. We have no new information as far as project or customer satisfaction. That statistic is similar to the last meeting, just because we just completed the projects before this meeting. And the performance as far as issuing the report is within our guidelines, and that does reflect the two reports that we've just issued. So with that, any questions on the dashboard?
Questions? Ms. Higgs.
Thank you. Through the chair to Mr. Price, just a question on process for the dashboards, and specifically with reference to the timing column. And if I go back to the dashboard that we received at our November meeting, and I'll pull one of the reports as an example, the computerized maintenance management system review, that one had a timing date of December 2020, which I had interpreted as being the date that the remaining observations would be addressed or closed out. And I now see on this report, that same audit report now has a timing date of March 2021 associated with it. So I guess my question to you is, how is it communicated back to the audit committee if the timing of the responses or the dates shifts? And just some level of awareness as to why the dates are shifting. And this is in no way being critical of if there's a need for a shift, it's more just the communication and awareness of that.
Yeah, that would be in the observation summary on page 80 of your package, and I think that's maybe where you're referring to is the timing column in that report, like in the next item.
Yes, Ms. Higgs, I think we hadn't quite got to that item yet. But I think that these are all related, so we can continue on with the questions. So go ahead.
Okay, so I can just answer the question by presenting the dashboard if that's helpful, unless there's other questions on the dashboard.
I'll just check with other members to see, is there any questions on the dashboard, knowing full well that we can come back to this if we need to. Otherwise, I think it would be appropriate for Mr. Price to present the next item, answer Ms. Higgs' questions, and take further questions. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Price.
Okay, so the observation summary, you'll note that some of the timing has slipped, and we did get updates from management, and most of the reasons are really due a lot to COVID and the fact that there has been changes in just some of the practicalities around responding to some of the comments, and as well just the focus of the different parts of the business trying to deal with COVID and deal with remote working and that sort of thing. The timelines themselves appear reasonable from what we've seen. There's nothing that would be concerning from our perspective, and they had rational reasons for the extension of the timelines. And the other thing to highlight too was in our last meeting, we had a discussion specifically around the Dearness Home assessment and some of the comments there, and the fact that there was, we put them back in the report as just past due observations. And those observations, again, just to highlight, is they do not relate to any sort of delivery of service to the residents. They're back office type observations, and the procedures that we're mentioning in those comments are more related to clerical activities that are not impacting delivery of service to residents. So what they've done is put a date that they feel is beyond the current COVID pandemic, and hoping that June 2022 they'll be able to address those back office concerns.
Okay, questions?
So that's the longest one as far as extension.
Ms. Higgs, did you have any follow-ups on that?
Yes, just one follow-up, and I think that is as anticipated. I wasn't surprised to see some of the timelines push due to COVID and other priorities. I guess I might put forward a request in future dashboards, if you're able to communicate to the audit committee the original expected due dates for responses and then revised due dates, just so that it's more visible when we do have a shift in timing from what we did originally planned.
Okay, no, we could do that.
Okay, questions from other colleagues? Seeing none. Does that conclude your assessment of these items, Mr. Price?
Yes, and I think the next items would be the two reports.
Yeah, we'll deal with those separately. So if there are no further questions, I'm going to look for a motion to receive items 4.3 through 4.6. Ms. Higgs, seconded by Councillor Van Holst. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Okay, on to the presentation of the findings. We'll deal with them separately, Mr. Price, and we'll start with 4.7, the securities review one.
Okay, thank you. So this report, the review was a review of the process looking at financial securities holdbacks, which are provided as part of the execution of a subdivision agreement. It didn't include any testing or evaluation of the calculation of the securities or testing the accuracy of the reduction or releases. And as we went through the process, we did find some key strengths. There was a commitment to continuous improvement, clear understanding of roles and responsibilities, and there was clearly documented process and procedures in place, and a strong culture and commitment to customer service. The findings themselves were rated medium for one of the comments, and then we had 4 comments that were low. If we move to page 3 or 84 in your package, you'll see a listing of the high-level description of those comments. I would say thematically, most of these relate to delivery and service to the I guess the customers of the service, which would be mainly the developers. But the first one, the medium one, relates to the roles and reporting lines were adequately understood by staff, and the structure was in place, but we noticed that there were some inefficiencies where there was maybe too many individuals involved in the process that could be reduced without impacting internal controls or segregation of duties. And management has a process or agreed to most of that comment and provided a response to that they'll remediate. And then the 4 low comments I won't go through in detail, but they mostly relate to improving the communication and monitoring of the service and the timeliness and effectiveness of the delivery of the service. So are there any questions, or is that an adequate level of detail?
Yes, questions for Mr. Price. And then, of course, this is the findings report, so there's also our staff available for question and comment on this as well to committee members. So are there questions on this one? No? Oh, Councillor Van Holst, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So staff seem to be in agreement with the recommendations. And so perhaps through you, I could ask how long they think they would take to implement this.
I don't know if it's Mr. Yeoman, Mr. Kotsovich. We got a whole team of people here. Who would like to respond to the councillor's question?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's Mr. Yeoman, if that's okay.
Perfect, go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor. We appreciate the inquiry on this. Yes, we are in support of the recommendations that are before you here. We anticipate that we can start streamlining things within the next few months, working with our colleagues in financial planning and policy. However, some of the resourcing pieces are going to take a little bit of time. There is potentially positions that are a position that may be required as part of this as well. That is something we're going to explore through the next multi-year budget. Right now, the securities matter is fairly side of the desk for a variety of people, and we're trying to consolidate it and improve service as the auditors have recommended. So we'll start with the low-hanging fruit with near-term implementation this year, and then we'll continue to explore other options as we proceed in the coming years.
Okay, further questions? All right, if there are no further questions on this, I'll look for a motion to receive the findings report. Councillor Van Holst. Seconded by Councillor Helmer. Any further discussion? No? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Next up is the class replacement project post implementation reconciliation process review. Mr. Price, over to you.
Okay, thank you. You'll notice in the executive summary on page 99 of your package and 2 of the report, there is some background and review of the objectives and scope of this project. We have done other projects around the class replacement project, focusing mainly on the pre-implementation and some of the project management aspects of the project. That was not part of this project. In this project, we focused on the current processes between the Parks and Recreation team and the finance teams for doing balancing and reconciliations of amounts that are in transactions. We did not include any, as I said, any testing of the system implementation or project management in this project. And we do mention that the new software tool, just for your reference, is called Perfect Mind. So in the past, we've referred to it as a class replacement project, and the new software is Perfect Mind, if that is mentioned in here. The key strengths, we did see leadership team commitment to implementation and continuous improvement, collaborative approach across the stakeholders to enable business continuity and provide a high level of service. The team was very knowledgeable in all aspects because we dealt with both Parks and Recreation and the finance teams on this project. And they're able to demonstrate the functionality of the new product and also the process that relates to that. So moving on to the areas of the findings, we had 2 that were medium priority and 1 low priority. The first medium priority one related to roles and responsibilities again. And a lot of the roles and responsibilities and reporting lines are understood by staff, and the governance structure and mechanisms were not defined necessarily in a formal way for certain reconciliation tasks. And I think part of that, you'll see in the response from management, is that my understanding is that some of those may actually be defined in overarching policies that are maybe not communicated to all or related to the reconciliation process. So they have some responses that indicate that, and what they're doing is putting more documentation in place to make it clear what the roles are as they complete the tasks. The second medium observation is around governance again. And really this is more relevant as they're implementing the software, but it's something that they will use on a go-forward basis, is the issues log. Obviously, as they're implementing the system, there's a number of issues come up, and we could see that there wasn't necessarily clear governance structure and definition of responsibilities for some of the items. And also some of the communication around the issues log wasn't entirely clear from our perspective, and maybe more informal. And what they've done is added some formality to that and assigning roles and responsibilities, and will put those improvements in place on a go-forward basis. but knowing that, you know, the relevance that obviously will go down as the Perfect Mind system is put fully in place. And then the low comment was just around process documents and just improving some of the process documentation. So with that, if there's any questions, let me know.
Okay, questions on 4.8, and we also have our staff available to answer questions of members as well. Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you. So the first medium priority one seemed to relate to some procedures that we've got in some place and but not in other places. And I guess that means is the reconciliation. I think that's what it was. All the directions weren't in that one place, and you had to refer to some overarching ones as it was described. So I guess my question is, how many people would be needing to access both of these things? Is this a situation where we've got employees that understand where these things are and just know how to do it, or and it's really the problem is it would be bringing on somebody new? I guess that's my question. Is this mostly a problem bringing somebody new on who would look to this, look to the procedure and not really understand where to find all the information?
Councillor, are you asking us of both the auditors and our staff, or just our staff? I just want to clarify.
Let me ask that of the staff. Is that
sure? So I see a number of staff on from this area. I see Mr. Oldham. I'm not sure who will take this, but I'll look to you to see if we can pass this off to someone.
Thank you, through the chair. Yeah, I think you captured that fairly well. We have lots of folks who know what they're doing very well, and there's a lot of historical knowledge, but there are a few areas along the process from input at the point of sale system at the front to the final reconciliation at finance that we are going to work to define a little bit better.
okay? And I guess my next question might be, how often would someone be brought into a process like this, as we're training somebody new to do this particular task?
Mr. Oldham?
Through the chair, I can't really speak to the side. I defer to Mr. Collins on the reconciliation side of things.
Mr. Collins.
Through the chair to the committee, from the corporate finance standpoint, turnover in the balancing and reconciliating item is fairly infrequent. However, we are governed by our cash handling policy and procedures. In this observation, we recognize that there's an opportunity to better hone our documentation, not only on our side, but also in the operations area. So as the councillor has alluded to, when we onboard new individuals in some of the seasonal areas, that their roles and responsibilities are more clearly articulated than what is identified in an overarching policy. So we'll be working with Mr. Oldham's team to ensure that their documentation of who does what and who is responsible for what is articulated better than what it currently is right now. As Mr. Oldham indicated, there's a lot of internal knowledge known, but we all recognize that we need to do a better job documenting those procedures for those various areas where a point of sale system is utilized.
Councillor, go ahead.
Okay, and thank you. And of course, that is an advantage to bringing new people on. A disadvantage of having documentation in two places is that you might change one and forget to change another, and then people are doing two different things. That can cause some confusion as well. How would we deal with that?
Through the chair to the committee, as part of the Perfect Mind implementation, we've set up check-in points with our colleagues in Parks and Recreation with Finance, which has been working out really well as part of this reconciliation and balancing process. And based on conversations with Mr. Oldham, we will look to continue that process so that we can ensure there's that consistency in our documentation so that things don't come out of line with one another. All procedure documents or process documents are under the guise of the cash handling policy, which is maintained by Finance. So as indicated in one of the recommendations, all procedures or documentation will be shared with Finance, and Finance will look over them so that we can ensure there's that consistency between the overarching policy with that of the procedures and documentations that is held by the operational end. Thank you.
Okay. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further questions? Okay. Oh, Councillor Turner.
Yeah, thanks. Just a really quick one. It seems like the recommendations are all reasonable. The responses from management sound reasonable as well. That especially in the first one with the cash handling processes. I think my question here is around the level of exposure. Recognizing that there are there's quite a seasonality to the staff that might be involved in cash handling. Identifying all the specific positions by role might be challenging. I imagine that we've seen a fair amount of decrease in the amount of cash on hand in the transactions involved with recreational programs, but I think that's more anecdotal than anything else. So I would look for some comments to say, are we seeing the risk decreasing as a result of a switch to cashless payment methods, or are these programs, especially in something like a pool for a rec swim or something like that, still very much cash-based? And then to what degree do we find at any particular site that we might find ourselves exposed to a loss of control in cash that could end up finding ourselves short or otherwise? My sense is that it's a generally small exposure, and it's really based on a site-by-site basis. Would that be correct?
Through the chair, yes, that would be correct. Perfect Mind as a function allows for pre-registering for bookings, which was not available in class in the past. So we now have people paying and booking for drop-in programs online, and very little cash was coming through when we were open.
Thank you, Mr. Oldham. Through you, Mr. Chair, to the auditors, perhaps just I guess a sense of what the materiality is in terms of the risk associated with, specifically around the cash handling process. Is this, and probably why it's a medium priority, not a high priority, or set?
Mr. Price?
Yeah, no, I'd agree. Is that I know we've had discussions throughout the process of implementing Perfect Mind around the level of cash, and you know, I agree that the risk is lower, and that is part of the reason that you know, if it was entirely cash, the risk would be much higher.
Great, very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions or comments on 4.8? Okay, seeing none, I'll look for a mover and a seconder for receipt of this finding report. Councillor Van Holst, Councillor Turner. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. Thank you, Mr. Price, for presenting all those reports. Thank you to you and your team for the work. And of course, thank you to our staff who obviously do all of the work in you know, helping implement any of the findings. And you've heard some of those comments today. So we're through the items for direction. Deferred matters, additional business. There's none on the agenda. Are there any from committee members? Okay, seeing none, I would look for a motion to adjourn then. Councillor Turner, seconded by Councillor Van Holst. All those in favor of adjournment? That's everyone. We're adjourned. Thank you for your time today.